So I found that out. Then I ran for school board, and I after the third try, well, they were really upset when I ran. I ran 3 times. 2 times I lost. Third time I won. I did win by a few votes, and I remember them they counted the votes 2 times at the Opera House in Camden, just to make sure that, possibly she didn't win. Well, I won. I got on. The superintendent was a change agent out of Harvard, and I'll explain what that is in a second, if people don't know. And I did do a pretty good job there. I got rid of the values-destroying values clarification. I got, even the liberals went along with me getting rid of that horrible Sidney Simon program. And I did get 5 minutes of grammar a day. Can you imagine? They wouldn't let, this back in the 70s. They were getting rid of everything, getting rid of the math, good sound math, getting rid of grammar, getting rid of history, getting rid of anything that was academic. Everything was soft, fuzzy, touchy, kids sitting on the floor studying or in circle, in round desks. And I did a pretty good job, but I lost the next election. But while I was on the board, this has to do with change agents, I had a phone call from a retired teacher, and she said, because I'd been writing some letters to the paper too, and of course she'd seen everything in the paper, because every time I opened my mouth as a board member, they'd dump on me. And she said, you're absolutely correct. She said, I've been a teacher for many years. I taught in Europe. She's a master teacher. And she said, you're right on. But she said, I think there's something that maybe it would be good for you to go and see what they're really up to. I want you to go to be trained as a change agent. Well, at that time, I really didn't know what I'd been up against with a superintendent. I really didn't know that there was such a thing as a change agent. And she said, I'll pay for you. And it was $100 back then. And it was up in Searsport, Maine, the training. And I went. And there were really nice people there, teachers, principals, etc. Some I knew. Our principal was there from the high school. And they luckily gave us a textbook that was a big fat thing called Innovations in Education, A Change Agent's Guide. And it was put together by Professor Ronald Havelock at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And it was federally funded. And it had case studies in it by real teachers, and these were real studies of situations, the implementation of very controversial programs in the schools. And in other words, you have to be trained to manipulate the community in order to get the program in. So it taught you, there must have been about 25 or 30 of them, how these different teachers and principals did it. Like it was a science teacher who got the sex ed in, and how he got around the community, and red flags, and the Christian uprising, and this and that, and what do you do? How do you deal with these people, and how do you go after them? And I was trained how to identify the resistors in my community. Absolutely. And when he said that, I thought, you asked me in the beginning, what got me going? That got me going. When you are trained to identify yourself, because I was a resistor, I thought, wow. I thought back to the people on the boat coming back on the Vietnam, the freighter from the Far East. I thought back to those people from North Vietnam and China, who had told me about identifying resistors and how members of their family were identified and how her grandfather was paraded around town with his head off. He had been a leader in town. So they paraded him around, just his body, so you could see. You don't resist. That's what happens. And so here I was being taught how to identify the resistors. The people who are smart people who know that sex ed, drug ed, decision making, alcohol education, bullying education, critical thinking, everything that has education hanging off the end of it. Watch it. That's a red flag for any parent or anyone out there listening, because that is not traditional education. That is brainwashing. Those programs, they say they're for the good of our children. All of them are devoted to behavioral change, behavioral and attitudinal change. And basically, the purpose of them is to do exactly the opposite of what they say they're meant to do. And I have the proof of that in my book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. 700 pages of documents, chronologically arranged, starting in the late 1800s, mid-1800s, all the way through to today, basically, because George Bush is doing exactly what Clinton was doing, what Reagan really carved the ultimate agenda in stone. They've been working on it for about 100 years, but he carved it in stone when I was in the U.S. Department of Ed, and we'll get into that later. But anyway, the change agent training just scared me to death. These programs, the one I'm talking about here, was death education. The Guidance Counselors Association in Washington, D.C., at their headquarters, they publish a journal, and one of their monthly or quarterly journals was devoted to death education, which I think most parents know. You know, the kids have to go and lie down on tombstones and go to the mortuary and study all of the global religions, you know, for heaven's sake, don't mention Christianity, you know, Buddhism, Hinduism, mysticism, you know, whatever religion, everybody's religion except the basic religion for the United States, and the funeral ceremonies, right? But anyway, in this particular issue, it's terribly important because this went out to all the guidance counselors across the country. It said, quote, "We in the death education movement will use death education to change the students' attitudes and values and beliefs about death and dying the same way we used sex education to change their attitudes towards sex and various sexual practices." And when I saw that, I thought, sometimes they make mistakes. I guess they never figured I was going to read that. But that was the proof, all the proof I ever needed, that these people, these change agents, their goal is to destroy traditional morality and academics. It's total, deliberate destruction of morals, academic and moral destruction. And people would say, "Oh, you know, that woman, she is a kook. Why would they do that?" Well, it's a lot cheaper than bombers, and it's a lot less obvious. You can take a country through the schools, and they've done it. That's why you have all these people out there who don't understand you. When you try to tell them something, they're nice, they're sweet people, your friends, your neighbors, and they look at you with a glazed expression because they have been victimized. Psychological warfare, and it's been played out in the schools and the media every day in your community, television, etc. But the schools basically have been, and the poor teachers have been victimized even more than the children. So anyway, I went through that training. I was appalled. I was also told to identify the important people in the community, you know, who are the head of the garden club, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, all the people that, you know, good people, and they've been taken to the cleaners too. They think they've been doing the right thing for their. I mean, some of them are major change agents. Don't think it's just in the schools. You'll have the head of the Rotary could be a major change agent to collectivize your community, right? Through sustainable development, the schools, regionalism, all of this is communism. Regionalism is communism. Good quote in my book from a leading communist who wrote in the Communist Daily World.
What exactly is regionalism?
Well, Lenin called for it. First of all, regionalism is this council form of government, which is a Soviet form of government. It means you have unelected councils. You drop the borders between the town, the county, and the state. You end up with an amorphous group, a region, which doesn't represent you any longer because it's bigger. You know, it's moved out. I was as a school board member, I was appointed to be on the vocational ed council for 4 different school districts. And I saw it there. That's probably easier for people to understand. We were a wealthy town, Camden, Maine, and we ended up paying the lion's share for all the other towns. Redistribution of wealth. Redistribution of wealth. She didn't win, huh? Well, I won. I got on. The superintendent was a change agent out of Harvard, and I'll explain what that is in a second, if people don't know. And so I found that out. Then I ran for school board, and I after the 3rd try, well, they were really upset when I ran. Can you imagine? I ran 3 times, 2 times. I did do a pretty good job there. I got rid of the values-destroying values clarification. I got, even the liberals went along with me getting rid of that horrible Sidney Simon program. And I did get 5 minutes of grammar a day. Can you imagine? They wouldn't let, this back in the 70s. They were getting rid of everything, getting rid of the math, good sound math, getting rid of grammar, getting rid of history, getting rid of anything. I lost. 3rd time I won, I did win by a few votes, and I remember them they counted the votes 2 times at the Opera House in Camden, just to make sure that, possibly